Hello, you're watching TVP World News. I'm Ina Shevsky. On the eve of the 4th anniversary of Russia launching its full-scale invasion of Ukraine, EU's foreign affairs representatives are gathering in Brussels to discuss a range of issues, including ongoing support for Kyiv. Our correspondent Zuzanna Jurek is in Brussels and has more. Hello, Zuzanna. So what can we expect from these discussions today? And what sort of hurdles may actually emerge in the process?
Good morning, Jonas. So I think it's first important to underline that the European leaders, that foreign affairs ministers who have been arriving this morning, have been underlining that this meeting serves as a pivotal moment. As you mentioned, it does come at an eve of the 4th anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And we know that primarily the discussions today will pertain to the ongoing military and financial aid for Kyiv. The EU has previously earmarked 90 billion euros in military aid, 60 of which is supposed to be in military aid alone for Kyiv in its budget for 2026-2027. Now, over the weekend, we've heard Hungary stating that or threatening that it will block these loans and using it as a leverage to reinstate the oil deliveries from Russia via the Druzhba pipeline, which has been damaged in late January. Both the Prime Minister Viktor Orbán as well as the Foreign Affairs Minister Peter Szijjártó have stated that until the oil deliveries resume, they will block the amendment of EU's budget, which is needed as a guarantee for the headroom to make the loan available. Now, apart from the direct financial aid to Kyiv, we also know that the EU's foreign policy chief Kaja Kallas is very adamant about trying to get the 20th package of sanction against Russia pushed through today. We know that these sanctions have also once again been threatened to be blocked by Hungary, and we know that these will primarily target once again Russia's shadow fleet, which is used to transport oil, and avert sanctions which have already been imposed on its energy sector. We also know that LNG would be included and its LNG producing capabilities, as well as its banking sector. So we know that Hungary is very adamant on trying to stop any additional support for Kyiv. But apart from that, Ukraine is not the only subject which is going to be discussed today. As we know, the tensions in the Middle East are also rising, particularly between the US and Iran, with the US President Donald Trump threatening a potential strike on military targets belonging to Iran, as well as the ongoing discussions pertaining to Trump's proposal of the Board of Peace. So it seems that the agenda is very packed today. We don't yet know how much progress will be made in these discussions, but it seems that the leaders are particularly keen to see progress relating to Ukraine. Jonas.
Zuzanna Jurek there live from Brussels. Thank you very much for joining here today and, of course, for giving us this latest update. Now, we're moving on to our next story. In his latest nightly address, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy spoke about Russia's attack on Lviv on Sunday, which left one person killed and 25 others wounded, calling it a terrorist act. Zelenskyy also said the strike is yet more proof that Moscow deliberately targets civilians, including those who are trying to save lives.
Today, there were several briefings from the Ministry of Internal Affairs, from Minister Ihor Klimenko and other law enforcement officials regarding the investigation into the terrorist attack in Lviv. It is difficult to describe it any other way. It was a terrorist act, cynical and cruel. 2 explosions occurred, the second one when emergency services had already arrived at the scene. 25 people were injured. Tragically, 1 person was killed, a 23-year-old police officer. My condolences to her family and loved ones. All those who are injured are now receiving assistance. Some are in serious condition and doctors are doing everything possible to save their lives. The circumstances of this terrorist attack are being fully investigated. Many facts are already known. The perpetrators were recruited via Telegram and Russia was behind it. The Ministry of Internal Affairs, the National Police of Ukraine and the Security Service of Ukraine will present the details to the public. Today, I instructed that measures be developed and implemented to prevent such crimes in the future. Our law enforcement officers already have relevant experience. Dozens of similar situations have been prevented. Ukrainian law enforcement agencies constantly counter such recruitment efforts.
Referring to threats by Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán to cut off energy supplies to Ukraine, Kyiv's ambassador to Poland, Vasyl Bodnar, told TVP World that Orbán, and I quote, doesn't even care about his compatriots, Ukrainian Hungarians, who are suffering from the same level of attacks, end of quote. Now, the rift between the two countries has widened after the flow of Russian crude through the Druzhba pipeline, leading through Ukrainian territory, has ceased, following what Kyiv says was a Russian military strike.
We have already heard the reaction of our Ministry of Foreign Affairs related to this statement and chantage de facto about the cut of supplies of electricity to Ukraine, which in bad need for that. But that is also unfair to listen to such an accusation, because it was a Russian attack on the refinery and the supply lines, which actually disrupt the supplies of this oil to Hungary, but it was not a Ukrainian fault. So that is the example of false usage of the situation which happened during the warfare in Ukraine, during the Russian attack on the infrastructure, which hurt the supply, and also the accusation which was composed by the Hungarian government and personally by Prime Minister Orbán related to the existing situation in Ukraine. And he doesn't take into account that Ukrainian cities are freezing, that the lack of electricity is also threatening the real life of Ukrainian people. But also he doesn't care about also his compatriots, Ukrainian Hungarians, who also are suffering from the same level of attacks. And when he's declaring this shortages or cutting down the supplies of electricity, he first of all is threatening his own compatriots in Ukraine.
Speaking to World News Tonight on Sunday, Reuters journalist Hugo Dixon suggested that Russian frozen assets should be moved from Belgian to EU control. He argues that shifting the funds would make it easier to later divert them to Ukraine.
Russia was bullying Belgium, where most of the assets are, and Belgium is small. It can't actually resist Russia on its own. So what we are proposing, I've got an international group that is focused on these Russian assets. What we're proposing is to move the entire Russian account away from Belgium. Not just the assets, but the liabilities as well. Just transfer the entire account to the European Union. And the European Union as a whole is much, much harder for Putin to bully. So that's what we're saying. And I think that we started this sort of mini campaign a couple of weeks ago, and we're beginning to get some traction for that. Now, that is not the same, of course, as actually providing the money to Ukraine. Shifting the account would be a first step. But what it would be like doing is it would be like putting a loaded gun on the table, because Putin would know that once it was no longer controlled by Belgium, but by the EU, it would be far easier to divert that money to Ukraine.
Slovakian Prime Minister Robert Fico is planning to visit the offices of the state-owned power transmission company and ask it to suspend emergency electricity supplies to Ukraine, according to a video published by his office on Sunday.
In the recording, Fico explains that since Kyiv wants Bratislava to stop buying Russian gas and oil and look for different suppliers, which would all mean a significant cost increase, then Slovakia has the right to respond. The Slovak PM also pointed out that in his opinion, the EU was putting Ukraine's interest above its members, concluding that it adds to the growing distrust in EU institutions across Europe. Fico accuses Zelenskyy of deliberately halting Russian oil supplies through the Druzhba pipeline, which was destroyed in a Russian attack at the end of last month, but according to the Slovak Prime Minister, can already resume normal operation. Slovakia's only refinery, Slovnaft, is currently operating thanks to the release of strategic reserves by the government. The government has declared a state of emergency in the oil sector.
A referendum on resuming Iceland's EU membership talks could be held as early as this August. The Icelandic parliament is expected to announce the exact date of the ballot within the next few weeks. Initially, a referendum on restarting EU accession talks had been expected to take place by 2027, after a previous government froze negotiations back in 2013. However, following a decision by Washington to impose tariffs on Iceland, as well as repeated threats by US President Donald Trump to annex Greenland, the government in Reykjavik has decided to speed up the timeline. If Icelanders vote yes in the referendum, they could join the EU before any other candidate country. US President Donald Trump is considering launching a major attack on Iran within the next few months to remove its leaders from power if diplomacy and a preliminary limited attack fail to secure concessions from Tehran on its nuclear program. This is according to a report published on Sunday by the New York Times. The Thursday negotiations set to take place in Geneva are reportedly seen as the final attempt to avoid armed conflict by the Trump administration. According to White House sources, Trump has not yet made a final decision, but is leaning towards a preemptive strike in the coming days to show Iranian leaders that they must agree to give up their ability to produce nuclear weapons. Possible targets include the headquarters of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, nuclear facilities and installations connected to Iran's ballistic missile program. Security is under review at Mar-a-Lago after an armed man was shot and killed by law enforcement outside Donald Trump's Florida resort. Authorities say the incident unfolded early Sunday and remains under federal investigation.
These were the scenes in Palm Beach, Florida on Sunday after a man carrying a shotgun breached a secure perimeter at Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort. Officials say the suspect, believed to be in his early 20s, was also carrying a fuel canister when he was confronted by two agents from the United States Secret Service and a local deputy. Authorities say the man dropped the fuel container but raised the shotgun into what they described as a firing position, prompting officers to open fire.
At this time, no law enforcement personnel were injured during the incident. We want to be clear, the President of the United States was not in the state of Florida. And this remains an active investigation by the FBI.
The man was declared dead at the scene. U.S. President Donald Trump was at the White House in Washington, D.C. at the time. The FBI will be the lead investigation agency in this case going forward.
The 2026 Milano Cortina Winter Olympics have concluded with the closing ceremony held in the ancient Verona Arena amphitheater. Two identical cauldrons, which have been burning for 2 weeks in host cities, Milan and Cortina d'Ampezzo, have also been extinguished. They will remain dark for several days before their new versions with updated colors and music are lit for the Paralympic Games events and celebrations from the 6th to the 15th of March. The Olympic baton will now pass to the French Alps, which are expected to follow a similar blueprint of using multiple existing winter sports venues in 2030 to reduce the environmental impact of hosting the Games. And that's all for now. Thank you for watching, and please stay with us here on TVP World.